They came back, in fact, from verse 26. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole of Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. All right? So here, meaning they agreed, it's a good land. It's a fertile land. It's an excellent land. Here is its fruit. But the people who lived there, so verse 28, what happens is this. They saw that the land was good, but immediately they shifted their focus on the challenges. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw the descendants of Anak there. The descendants of Anak are the giants. So it's the descendants of the Nephilim, the giants at the time. We even saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev, and the Hittites and Jebusites and the Amorites live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. Then Caleb, verse 30, silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. So we find the other men telling the Israelites assembly that, listen, it's impossible to take hold of the land. Yes, the land is good. Why? Because there are inhabitants bigger and stronger than us. But Caleb, in fact, the Lord said Caleb had a different spirit. Caleb said to them, he silenced the people in front of Moses and says, we should go up there and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. So Caleb had faith. The Israelites were filled with fear, and the fear was so much, and the fear that they had was so great, that the Bible tells us that they saw themselves as grasshoppers compared to the inhabitants of that land, because there were giants in that land at the time. So they were so overcome by the fear, by the size, by the strength of the inhabitants of the land, that they saw themselves as grasshoppers in the presence of the inhabitants of that land. And that is exactly what fear does. Fear takes our focus off the size of God, the power of God, and the faithfulness of God. It keeps us focused on our own ability to address the mountains or the giants before us. And whenever we take our focus off God and focus on those mountains and giants, then what happens is that we too become like grasshoppers before those giants and before those mountains. Numbers 13, verse 33 says, we saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. When we take our eyes off the power of God, the faithfulness of God, and the size of God, and we look at our giants and our mountains, then we too become like grasshoppers. We too seem helpless. We seem completely incapable of overcoming the situation because we have taken our eyes off God. What does Psalm 121, 1-8 tell us? It tells us to take a very, very different perspective. It tells us not to focus on the giants or to focus on the mountains, but to focus on God. Psalm 121, verse 1-8, it says, the psalmist says, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, who? The maker of heaven and earth. Verse 3, he will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going both now and forevermore. So he said at the beginning, he says, I lift up my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? What we see there is a sense of dejection. He feels overwhelmed by the mountain or the giants that face him. But very quickly, what happens? He shifts his focus to God, and he realizes, hang on a second, my help comes from the Lord, who? He's the creator of the heaven and of the earth. And when you compare that mountain to the heavens and of the earth, which are infinite in size, suddenly this giant, this mountain becomes like a grasshopper before God. And we see a change in his attitude. We see a change in his mindset. So the psalmist takes his focus off the mountains and turns to God. And as soon as he shifts his focus to God, his tone changes. He remembers the faithfulness of God. He remembers the goodness of God. He remembers the promises of God. He will not let your foot slip. He will watch over you. He will not slumber, meaning he will not sleep. The Lord watches over you. He is your shade at your right hand. He will not allow the sun to harm you, nor the moon to harm you by night. He will watch over you from all harm, keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. He will watch over your coming and your going. Every moment, the Lord is with him, both now and forevermore. As soon as he took his eye off the mountain or the problem or the situation and focused on God, his entire tone changes. And that's a very, very important lesson that we can learn from here, is to remember and recount the faithfulness of God. No matter what we're going through, because when we recount the faithfulness of God, it fills us with faith. But in Deuteronomy 1 and Numbers 13, sadly, we see that the children of Israel are doing the exact opposite. And what we see is that they focus on the fear, they focus on the mountain, they focus on the giants, they focus on the challenges, and as a result, they are not filled with faith. And that fear we see creates doubt in their hearts, and that doubt leads to rebellion against the instruction of God. God clearly told them to what? Go up and take possession. It was not a suggestion. God is commanding the children of Israel to go up and take possession because God had promised them the land. But because of their focus, they were filled with fear. The fear created doubt. The doubt then led to rebellion and disobedience to the instruction of God. And ultimately, they paid a very heavy price for their rebellion. They paid a very heavy price for their disobedience to God's command to take possession of that land because of their fear and their doubt. And that price was that none from that generation of Israelites made it to the promised land. Instead, God decided that it would be their descendants and their children that would actually go into the promised land, along with Caleb and Joshua.